The day I installed my diesel backup heater in my garage was the same day I accidentally painted a target on my back for the most vindictive HOA president in all of Minnesota. I had just moved into the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision in Duluth 3 months earlier, a quiet development of about 80 homes nestled between the industrial port district and the residential neighborhoods climbing the hillside. The location meant we got hit with the full force of Lake Superior's winter weather, and after experiencing my first power outage in November that lasted 18 hours with temperatures dropping to -15, I decided I needed a backup heating solution. My name is Daniel Anderson, and I work as an industrial mechanic at the shipping docks. I understand machinery, I understand diesel systems, and I definitely understand the importance of staying warm when the power grid decides to take a vacation during a Minnesota winter. The diesel heater I purchased was a legitimate, certified unit designed specifically for residential backup heating. It was enclosed in a ventilated cabinet in my detached garage, had all the proper emissions controls, met state and federal environmental standards, and was installed by a licensed HVAC contractor. I had the permits, the inspections, and everything was completely above board. What I did not have was approval from Meadowbrook Hills HOA. I learned this exactly 1 week after installation, when I found a bright pink violation notice taped to my front door. The notice, printed on official HOA letterhead with an obnoxiously ornate border, informed me that I was in violation of Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 3 of the HOA covenants, which apparently prohibited any fuel storage or combustion equipment visible or audible from neighboring properties or common areas. The fine was $500, with an additional $100 per day until the violation was corrected. I read the notice 3 times, standing on my front porch in my work boots and heavy Carhartt jacket, my breath fogging in the December air. The heater was not visible from anywhere except inside my garage. It was not audible unless you were standing directly next to the garage with the door open. And I had checked the covenants before purchasing the property. I knew them inside and out, because I had specifically looked for any restrictions that might affect my plans for the property. The next evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting held in the community center, a small building near the subdivision entrance that doubled as a storm shelter. About 20 homeowners showed up, most of them retirees or stay-at-home parents who had the time and inclination to involve themselves in neighborhood politics. I recognized a few neighbors, including Tom Brennan from 2 houses down and Lisa Kowalski from across the street. The meeting was run by Karen Jameson, the HOA president, a woman in her late 40s with severely highlighted blonde hair styled in that particular cut that seems to be issued along with HOA board positions. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and had a way of looking at people over her reading glasses that made everyone feel like they had disappointed her personally. "Now then," Karen said after calling the meeting to order and running through the standard procedural items. "We need to address a serious violation that has come to the board's attention. Mr. Anderson, I see you are in attendance. Would you care to explain why you have installed industrial equipment on your property without board approval?" I stood up, holding the violation notice. "It is not industrial equipment. It is a residential backup diesel heater, fully permitted by the city, inspected, and in complete compliance with all state and federal regulations. I checked the HOA covenants before I bought the house, and there is nothing that prohibits backup heating systems." Karen smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 3 clearly states that combustion equipment is prohibited. That section refers to outdoor fire pits and decorative chimeneas, I said. I have the original covenant documents from 2003 when this subdivision was developed. The section you are citing was added during a revision in 2008, specifically to address a neighbor dispute about someone having weekend bonfire parties. A murmur went through the small crowd. Karen's smile tightened. The language is clear. Combustion equipment includes any device that burns fuel. By that interpretation, every gas furnace, gas water heater, and gas stove in this neighborhood is a violation, I pointed out. My backup heater is enclosed, vented, inspected, and legal. I am not removing it. Then you will continue to accrue fines, Karen said simply. We have standards in this community, Mr. Anderson. Standards that keep property values high and ensure a certain quality of life for all residents. I sat down, frustrated but not surprised. I had dealt with people like Karen before. They found a small amount of power and wielded it like a weapon, using rules and regulations to control others and inflate their own sense of importance. After the meeting, Tom Brennan caught up with me in the parking lot. "Hey, do not let her get to you," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "Karen has been on a power trip since she got elected president 2 years ago. She fined the Hendersons for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox post. The Hendersons. They have lived here since the subdivision was built. I am not paying the fine," I said. "And I am not removing the heater. Let her take it to court if she wants." Tom laughed. "Good for you, man. Someone needs to stand up to her. Most people just pay the fines because it is easier than fighting." Over the next 3 weeks, I received additional violation notices every few days. The daily fines accumulated. I ignored them. I also filed a formal dispute with the HOA board, citing the specific language of the covenants and providing documentation that my heater was not only legal, but also fell outside the scope of the prohibition, even if interpreted broadly. My dispute was denied in a form letter that looked like it had been generated from a template. I then requested a hearing before the board, which was my right under the HOA bylaws. That request was acknowledged, but no hearing date was set. Meanwhile, December turned into January, and the weather reports started tracking a major Arctic system moving down from Canada. The meteorologists were calling it a potential repeat of the 2019 polar vortex that had brought life-threatening cold to the entire upper Midwest. Temperatures were predicted to drop below -30, with wind chills approaching -50 or worse. I made sure my diesel heater was in perfect working order. I had 200 gallons of diesel fuel in a certified storage tank, also properly permitted and inspected. My house had extra insulation I had added in the attic. My pipes were heat traced, and I had enough food and supplies to ride out an extended emergency. 3 days before the Arctic system was due to arrive, the city of Duluth issued a cold weather emergency alert. Schools were canceled preemptively. The port operations were suspended. Everyone was advised to stay indoors and avoid unnecessary travel. The power company sent out notifications warning that rolling blackouts might be necessary to preserve the natural gas supply, as heating demand was expected to exceed capacity. That last part was what caught my attention. Natural gas supply issues. Our subdivision, like most of residential Duluth, relied primarily on natural gas for heating. My house had a gas furnace, but I also had my diesel backup. I went ahead and got everything ready, connecting the backup heater to my home heating system through the transfer setup that the HVAC contractor had installed. The Arctic blast hit on a Thursday night. I watched the temperature display on my weather station drop steadily, 10 degrees, 5, 0, -5, -10. The wind picked up, howling around the corners of the house and rattling the storm windows. I had the gas furnace running normally, but I fired up the diesel backup just to make sure it was working properly. It hummed to life perfectly, pumping warm air through the ductwork. Friday morning, I woke to a temperature reading of -32 degrees outside. The inside of my bedroom windows had frost patterns despite the double pane glass. I went downstairs and checked the furnace. The gas furnace was running, but the house felt colder than it should. I checked the thermostat and noticed the temperature had dropped from the usual 70 degrees to 68. I turned on the local news while making coffee. The anchor, bundled in a heavy sweater despite being in a studio, was reporting on the crisis unfolding across the region. Natural gas pressure has dropped significantly across northern Minnesota, she said. Utility companies are reporting unprecedented demand, and the extreme cold has caused issues with distribution infrastructure. Residents are asked to lower thermostats to 65 degrees to help preserve supply for essential services. I immediately switched my heating system over to the diesel backup and shut off the gas furnace entirely. My house began warming back up within an hour. Outside, the wind continued to scream, driving the wind chill down to -45 degrees. It was the kind of cold where exposed skin freezes in less than 5 minutes, where car batteries die even when new, where the air itself seems to hurt when you breathe. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Tom Brennan. "Hey Daniel, how are you holding up over there?" he asked. I could hear the chattering of teeth in his voice. "I am fine," I said. "Switched over to my diesel backup. House is staying nice and warm. How about you?" "Our gas pressure is really low," Tom admitted. "The furnace keeps trying to fire, but it is not putting out enough heat. We are down to about 58 degrees inside. The kids are wearing coats indoors. Sarah is worried about the pipes freezing." "Come over," I said immediately. "Bring the family. I have got plenty of room and it is warm here." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. This is exactly why I installed the backup system." Tom and his family arrived 20 minutes later, all 4 of them bundled in every piece of winter clothing they owned. His kids, 2 boys aged 7 and 10, looked like little marshmallows in their puffy coats. They thawed out in my living room, marveling at how warm the house was. "This is amazing," Tom's wife Sarah said. "I can actually feel my fingers again." My phone rang again. This time it was Lisa Kowalski from across the street. "Daniel, I hate to ask, but is your heating working okay?" "I heard Tom mention something about your backup system." "It is working great," I said. "Do you need to come over?" "My mom lives with me," Lisa said. "She is 78 and the house is getting really cold. I am worried about her." "Come on over," I told her. Over the next several hours, more neighbors showed up. Word had spread through the subdivision that my house was warm and I was welcoming anyone who needed shelter. By Friday evening, I had 15 people in my house, including 3 elderly residents and 5 children. My living room looked like an emergency shelter, with people on couches, air mattresses, and sleeping bags spread across the floor. I made soup in my large stock pot, using ingredients from my freezer and pantry. The kitchen became a gathering place, warm and filled with the smell of simmering vegetables and beef. People who had been neighbors but not necessarily friends began talking, sharing stories, bonding over the shared crisis. Outside, the temperature dropped to -38 degrees. The wind chill was calculated at -55. It was literally one of the coldest nights in Duluth's recorded history. Around 8 that evening, there was a loud knock on my front door. I opened it to find Karen Jameson standing on my porch, wrapped in an expensive-looking wool coat but visibly shivering. Her car, a white Lexus SUV, was running in my driveway with exhaust billowing into the frigid air. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her voice tight, "I need to speak with you." I stepped aside to let her in. She entered, and immediately I saw her take in the scene. The living room full of neighbors, the children playing board games by the fireplace insert I had running on low, the warm air and the smell of food cooking, the general atmosphere of people taking care of each other. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Jameson?" I asked. She pulled me aside away from the main group. "I need to borrow your diesel heater," she said quietly. I stared at her. "I am sorry, what?" "My house has no heat," she said. "The gas pressure in my neighborhood is completely gone. The house is down to 45 degrees. My pipes are going to freeze. I need your diesel heater." The irony was so thick I could taste it. This was the woman who had been fining me $100 per day for having the heater in the first place. The woman who had refused to hear my dispute or schedule a hearing. The woman who had threatened legal action if I did not remove what she called industrial equipment. "The heater is not portable," I said. "It is installed as part of my home heating system. I cannot just pack it up and move it." "Then I need to stay here," Karen said. "Just for tonight, until the gas comes back on." I looked at the living room full of neighbors who had thanked me profusely for opening my home, who had brought what food they could to contribute, who were helping with dishes and entertaining each other's children. Then I looked at Karen, who had made my life difficult for weeks over a safety device that was now the only thing standing between the people in this room and potential disaster. "The fine notices," I said. "All of them. You withdraw them completely." Karen's jaw tightened. "Mr. Anderson, this is an emergency." "Yes, it is," I agreed. "An emergency that my backup diesel heater is handling perfectly. The heater you wanted me to remove. The heater you have been fining me for. Withdraw the fines and acknowledge in writing that the heater is not in violation of any covenant and you can stay." "That is extortion," she hissed. "No, that is me setting boundaries for who I allow in my home," I replied calmly. "You made your position on my heater very clear." "I am making my position clear now. You are welcome to try other neighbors, but I know for a fact that most of them are either here or have no heat themselves." Karen stared at me for a long moment. I could see her pride warring with her desperation. Finally, she pulled out her phone. "Fine. I will send an email to the board right now withdrawing all fines and violations related to your heating system." "I want to see it before you send it," I said. She typed furiously on her phone, her lips pressed into a thin line. She showed me the screen. The email was addressed to the other 4 board members and copied me. It stated that upon further review, my diesel backup heating system was not in violation of HOA covenants, and all fines were withdrawn effective immediately. It was terse and clearly written under duress, but it was in writing. "Send it," I said. She hit send. I watched the email arrive in my inbox on my own phone. "You can stay," I told her, "but you help out like everyone else. There are dishes that need washing and kids that need watching." Karen's expression suggested she had swallowed something sour, but she nodded. She made a call to have someone pick up her car so it was not left running in my driveway, and then she awkwardly joined the group in the living room. The night passed slowly. The cold outside was relentless, savage, the kind of cold that made the house creak and groan despite the warmth inside. I checked the diesel heater every few hours. It ran smoothly, efficiently, doing exactly what it was designed to do. The fuel gauge showed I had plenty of reserves. I slept in shifts, making sure someone was always awake to monitor conditions. Around 3 in the morning during my watch, I heard a soft voice from the doorway to the living room. It was Karen. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I looked up from the book I was reading. "Okay." She came into the kitchen and sat at the table. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable without her usual armor of authority. "I moved to this neighborhood 5 years ago after my divorce," she said. "My ex-husband was a contractor. He was always starting projects and never finishing them. Our yard was always a mess, equipment everywhere, noise, complaints from neighbors. It was embarrassing. I listened but did not speak. When I became HOA president, I thought I could make sure no one else had to live next to that kind of chaos," she continued. "I thought I was protecting property values and quality of life. But somewhere along the way, I think I became the problem I was trying to prevent. I turned into the person making everyone's life harder." "Your experience is not everyone's experience," I said. "I am not your ex-husband. My equipment is legal, safe, and properly maintained. You did not even come look at it before issuing fines." "I know," she said. "And you would have been completely justified in turning me away tonight. Thank you for not doing that." I shrugged. "This is what neighbors do. We help each other. That is what a community is supposed to be about, not fines and violations and power trips." She nodded slowly. "After this is over, I am going to resign as HOA president. I think I have done enough damage." "Maybe do not resign," I said. "Maybe just remember what it feels like to need help. Remember that rules should serve people, not the other way around." Saturday morning brought slightly warmer temperatures, rising all the way to -23 degrees. The utility company issued a statement that natural gas pressure was slowly being restored, but that some areas might be without adequate service for another 24 to 48 hours. They prioritized hospitals, nursing homes, and emergency services first, then residential areas. Most of my overnight guests went home during the day to check on their houses and retrieve more supplies. Tom and his family stayed, as did Lisa and her elderly mother. Karen also remained, though she spent most of the day on her phone coordinating with the other HOA board members and checking on other neighborhood residents. Sunday afternoon, the temperature finally climbed above zero for the first time in 3 days. The natural gas pressure was restored throughout the city. People began venturing out, assessing damage, checking on neighbors. The crisis was over, though it would take days for life to fully return to normal. Karen left Sunday evening. Before she went, she shook my hand. "Thank you again," she said. "And I meant what I said. Things are going to change with the HOA. "I will hold you to that," I told her. Over the following weeks, life in Meadowbrook Hills did change. Karen remained as HOA president but took a completely different approach. She started actually visiting homes before issuing violations, talking to residents about concerns rather than just sending notices. She pushed through a revision to the covenants that explicitly allowed backup heating and power systems, as long as they met local codes and regulations. She also organized a neighborhood emergency preparedness committee. Tom, Lisa, and I all joined. We developed a plan for the next major weather event, identifying which homes had backup systems, which residents might need extra help, and how to better communicate during emergencies. The story of my diesel heater and the Arctic blast became a bit of a legend in the neighborhood. People I did not know would stop me at the mailbox to thank me for opening my home. New neighbors moving in would hear the story and make a point to introduce themselves. Tom and I became good friends. We started having regular backyard barbecues once the weather warmed up, inviting neighbors over for burgers and beer. Sarah and Tom's kids loved coming over to see the infamous diesel heater, which I would show off like a proud parent displaying a trophy. One Saturday in March, I was in my garage working on my truck when Karen knocked on the open garage door. "Hey Daniel, do you have a minute?" "Sure, what is going on?" She held up a folder. "I wanted to show you something. The board approved it last night." I wiped my hands on a rag and took the folder. Inside was a new section drafted for the HOA covenants. Section 18, Emergency Preparedness Systems. It explicitly allowed backup generators, heaters, water storage, and other emergency equipment provided they met local regulations. It even included provisions for a neighborhood emergency fund to help residents install such systems. "This is great," I said. "There is more," Karen said. "We are also establishing a yearly community service award. It is going to recognize a resident who exemplifies good neighboring and community spirit. You are the first recipient." I laughed. "You do not have to do that." "We want to," she insisted. "What you did during the cold snap, opening your home, helping people, that is what community is supposed to be about. It is worth recognizing." The award ceremony was held at the spring HOA meeting in April. I felt ridiculous standing in front of my neighbors accepting a plaque, but the applause was genuine and warm. Tom whistled loudly. Lisa's mom, who had made me homemade cookies as a thank you after the cold snap, beamed from her seat. In my brief acceptance speech, I said, "I did not install that heater to be a hero or make a point. I installed it because I believe in being prepared and taking care of myself and my family. What I learned is that being prepared also means being prepared to help others. That is what neighbors do. We take care of each other." The room erupted in more applause. Karen, sitting at the board table, was clapping as enthusiastically as anyone. Life settled into a comfortable routine after that. The diesel heater sat quietly in my garage, a silent guardian against future emergencies. I ran it once a month just to keep everything in good working order, and every time I did, I thought about that brutal Arctic weekend when it had made all the difference. The following winter was much milder, with no major cold snaps or power issues. But I noticed that several of my neighbors had installed their own backup systems. Tom put in a whole house generator. Lisa got a wood-burning stove insert for her fireplace. Even Karen had a portable generator installed with a transfer switch for her essentials. The Emergency Preparedness Committee continued to meet monthly. We organized a neighborhood resilience fair where local contractors and suppliers set up booths to educate residents about backup systems, winterization, and emergency planning. It became an annual event, well attended and genuinely useful. In May, I received a letter from the City of Duluth's Emergency Management Department. They had heard about our neighborhood's response during the Arctic blast and wanted to feature Meadowbrook Hills as a model for community preparedness. They interviewed Karen, Tom, Lisa, and me for an article in the city newsletter and a segment on the local news. During my interview, the reporter asked what advice I would give other homeowners. "Do not wait for an emergency to think about being prepared," I said. "And do not let bureaucracy or red tape stop you from taking reasonable steps to protect yourself and your family. But also remember that preparation is not just about having equipment and supplies. It is about being ready to help your neighbors when they need it." The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. "What about the conflict with your HOA? That must have been frustrating." "It was," I admitted. "But it led to positive change. Karen Jameson could have held a grudge. She could have stayed angry. Instead, she recognized that the rules needed to change, and she made it happen. That takes courage and leadership." Karen, sitting off to the side during the interview, looked surprised and genuinely moved by the comment. The news segment aired the following week. My phone blew up with messages from friends, family, and even people I had not spoken to in years. My dad, a retired firefighter in Minneapolis, called to say he was proud of me. "You did the right thing," he said, "both with the heater and with helping your neighbors. That is how I raised you." Summer came, and with it the usual rhythm of lawn care, block parties, and kids playing in the streets. The HOA still existed, still had meetings, still dealt with the mundane business of maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable standards. But the tone had changed. There was more communication, more flexibility, more recognition that the association existed to serve the residents, not control them. In July, a new family moved in 3 houses down from me. They had a young daughter with special medical needs who required electricity for some of her equipment. During the moving process, Karen personally visited them to discuss their backup power needs and connect them with resources to install a medical-grade generator. She also made sure every neighbor on the block knew about the situation, so we could check in during any power outages. That small act said more about the changes in our community than any revised covenant or award ceremony ever could. August brought a different kind of crisis. Severe thunderstorms rolled through Duluth, dropping heavy rain and generating straight-line winds over 70 miles per hour. Trees came down across the city, power lines were knocked out, and thousands of homes lost electricity during a heat wave with temperatures in the mid-90s. My house lost power along with everyone else. But I had my diesel heater with its built-in generator hookup, which I had expanded over the spring to run more than just the heating system. I was able to keep my refrigerator running, charge phones, and run fans to deal with the heat. Once again, my house became a gathering place. This time, though, several other neighbors also had backup systems. Tom's generator was running his house. Lisa had a smaller portable unit. We coordinated through the Emergency Preparedness Committee's group chat, making sure everyone in the neighborhood was accounted for, and that those without power had somewhere to go. The power was restored after 36 hours, much faster than it could have been. But the experience reinforced the value of what we had built in the neighborhood, not just backup systems, but backup systems of people caring for each other. Karen stopped by after the power was restored. "Another crisis, another successful neighborhood response," she said. "I think we are getting good at this." "Let us hope we do not have to get too much practice," I replied. She laughed. "Agreed. Hey, I wanted to let you know that I am running for city council. The election is in November. My platform is going to focus on community resilience and emergency preparedness. I wanted to ask if you would be willing to publicly support my campaign." I was surprised but pleased. "Of course. You have really turned things around, Karen. I think you would do well on the council." "I learned from the best," she said, then quickly added, I learned from the situation, from my mistakes, from seeing what real leadership looks like." "I am not a leader," I protested. "You absolutely are," she countered. "You just lead by example instead of by rules and regulations. That is actually harder and more effective." Election season brought campaign signs to front yards across Meadowbrook Hills, including a "Karen Jameson for City Council" sign in my own yard. Tom and I even hosted a meet and greet for her campaign in September, with about 40 neighbors showing up to ask questions and voice their support. She won the election in November by a comfortable margin. In her victory speech at campaign headquarters, she specifically mentioned the lessons she had learned from the Arctic blast and thanked the residents of Meadowbrook Hills for teaching her what community really meant. December rolled around again, marking a full year since the Arctic blast and the diesel heater drama that had started everything. The HOA organized an anniversary event, a winter preparedness fair and potluck held at the community center. Local emergency management staff gave presentations, contractors answered questions, and everyone shared food and stories. I brought my famous chili, the recipe my dad had taught me. Tom brought his specialty, smoked brisket he had been working on since 5 that morning. Karen, surprisingly, brought homemade apple pies that were actually quite good. During the event, the new HOA president, a retired schoolteacher named Frank Mitchell, presented updated emergency preparedness statistics for our neighborhood. 1 year ago, 5 homes in Meadowbrook Hills had some form of backup heating or power, he announced. Today, 43 homes have backup systems installed. We have gone from 6% to 54%. That is extraordinary. The crowd applauded. Frank continued, "We have also had 0 major conflicts between residents and the HOA board this year, 0 violation fines issued for preparedness equipment, and we have had multiple instances of neighbors helping neighbors during emergencies. This is what success looks like." More applause. I caught Karen's eye across the room and she raised her cup of cider in a small toast. I nodded back. As the event wound down and people began leaving, Tom and I stood outside in the cold December evening, watching our breath fog in the air. The temperature was around 15 degrees, cold but nowhere near the extremes of the previous year. "You ever think about how weird life is?" Tom asked. "A year ago, you were getting fined for that heater. Now you are neighborhood famous and Karen is on the city council." "It has been a strange year," I agreed. "Strange but good," Tom said. "I mean, we could have all just stayed in our houses, not talked to each other, just been neighbors in name only. But now I feel like I actually live in a community. My kids have friends on every block. Sarah is part of a book club with 5 other neighborhood women. I know that if something goes wrong, there are a dozen people I can call. That is worth more than a warm house," I said. "Though the warm house is pretty nice too." Tom laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, it is getting cold out here. Let us go back inside and get some more of that brisket before it is all gone." We headed back into the community center, into the warmth and noise and laughter of our neighbors, our friends, our community. The diesel heater continued to sit in my garage, maintained and ready, a symbol of preparedness and independence, but also of the connections forged during crisis. It ran quietly through test cycles, consuming fuel efficiently, waiting patiently for the next time it might be needed. And if that time came, I knew exactly what I would do: keep my house warm and open my doors to anyone who needed shelter, because that is what the heater had taught me in the end. It was not just about having backup systems for power and heat. It was about being a backup system for your neighbors, a reliable source of help when everything else fails. It was about community in the truest sense, people choosing to take care of each other not because they had to, but because that is what decent human beings do. The winter passed without major incident. Spring came early, melting the snow and bringing the first hints of green to the landscape. Karen settled into her city council role, pushing initiatives for citywide emergency preparedness and community resilience. Tom started a neighborhood watch program that was actually about watching out for each other, not just watching for crime. Lisa's mom celebrated her 79th birthday with a huge party that half the neighborhood attended. And I continued working at the docks, coming home to a house that was part of something larger than itself, part of a genuine community that had been forged in the crucible of crisis and maintained through conscious effort and care. One evening in April, as I was grilling burgers in my backyard for a small gathering of neighbors, Tom asked me if I had any regrets about the whole diesel heater situation. "Regrets?" I repeated, flipping a burger. No, not really. I mean, the fines were annoying while they lasted, but they got resolved, and everything that came after was positive. But you could have avoided the whole conflict, Tom pointed out. If you had just asked permission first, or chosen a different heating solution, none of the drama would have happened. I thought about that while the burgers sizzled. Maybe, I said finally. But then, I would have let someone else's arbitrary interpretation of rules dictate my legitimate safety needs. I would have prioritized avoiding conflict over doing what I knew was right. And when the crisis came, I would have been unprepared, and so would everyone else who ended up in my living room that weekend. So you are saying the conflict was necessary. I am saying that standing up for yourself, even when it is uncomfortable, is sometimes necessary, I replied. And that good things can come from conflict if people are willing to learn and change. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Deep thoughts for a Thursday evening burger session. That is what I am here for, I said with a grin. Deep thoughts and perfectly grilled burgers. Sarah joined us on the patio, carrying a tray of drinks. What are you two philosophers discussing over here? The nature of conflict and community, Tom said with exaggerated seriousness. Well, stop it and come eat, she commanded. The potato salad is getting warm. We ate together as the spring evening settled into dusk, talking and laughing about nothing and everything. In the distance, I could see lights coming on in houses throughout the neighborhood, families settling in for the evening, secure and comfortable and connected in ways that had nothing to do with utilities or temperature. The diesel heater sat in my garage, silent and patient. It had served its purpose in more ways than just providing heat. It had been a catalyst for change, a focal point for conflict and resolution, a practical demonstration of preparedness that had inspired an entire community to think differently about resilience and mutual aid. In the end, it was just a machine, metal and fuel and combustion, physics and engineering doing what they were designed to do. But like all tools, its value was determined not by what it was, but by how it was used and what it represented. For me, it represented independence and responsibility, the willingness to prepare for problems before they arose. For Karen, it had become a lesson in humility and a reminder that control is not the same as leadership. For the neighborhood, it had been the spark that ignited a genuine sense of community, proving that people are at their best when they help each other through difficult times, and that, ultimately, was worth far more than $500 in HOA fines. As summer arrived, and the memory of the bitter cold faded into pleasant, distant recollection, life in Meadowbrook Hills hummed along contentedly. The HOA functioned smoothly under Frank's steady leadership, focusing on actual community needs rather than arbitrary enforcement. The Emergency Preparedness Committee continued meeting, expanding its focus to include other potential disasters: floods, tornadoes, extended power outages, even pandemic planning after everyone's recent experience with such events. I received occasional messages from people outside the neighborhood, folks who had heard the story and wanted advice on dealing with their own HOA conflicts or installing backup systems. I tried to help where I could, always emphasizing the importance of documentation, knowing your rights, and staying calm even when frustrated. One such inquiry came from a woman in Superior, Wisconsin, just across the bay from Duluth. She was fighting with her condo association over a solar panel installation. I spent an hour on the phone with her, walking through the legal frameworks and suggesting resources. 2 months later, she emailed to say she had won her case and the panels were installed. Small victories, but they mattered. Karen's work on the city council led to Duluth adopting new policies that restricted HOA authority over emergency preparedness equipment. Any system that met city codes and state regulations was automatically exempt from HOA restrictions, regardless of covenant language. It was a significant change that affected thousands of homeowners across the city. "You inspired this," Karen told me when the policy passed. "Your stubbornness and your willingness to stand up for common sense." "I was just trying to stay warm," I replied. "No," she said firmly. "You were doing what was right, even when it would have been easier to give in. That matters." Autumn came with its brilliant colors, the hillsides around Duluth exploding in reds and golds. The temperature began dropping again, reminding everyone that winter was coming, as it always did in Minnesota. But this year, the reminder brought a sense of readiness rather than dread, at least in Meadowbrook Hills. My diesel heater got its annual comprehensive servicing in October. The HVAC contractor who had installed it, a guy named Pete who had become a friend over the past year, did a complete inspection and declared everything perfect. "This is one of the best installations I have ever done," Pete said proudly. "Everything is running exactly as designed. You could run this thing continuously for months if you needed to." "Let us hope I never need to," I said. "Agreed. But if you do, you will be ready." As Thanksgiving approached, the neighborhood organized a community dinner at the community center. Everyone brought dishes to share, creating a massive feast that filled multiple tables. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful, with kids running around and adults catching up and laughter echoing off the walls. During the dinner, Frank stood up to make a brief announcement. "I just want to take a moment to recognize what we have built here over the past year," he said. "A year ago, we had some challenges, some conflicts, some learning experiences, but we came through it stronger and more connected. We learned that rules should serve people, that preparation is important, and that neighbors helping neighbors is what community is all about. So thank you to everyone who has contributed to making Meadowbrook Hills such a great place to live." He raised his glass of cider. "And a special thanks to Daniel Anderson, whose stubbornness and big heart started us down this path." Everyone turned to look at me. I felt my face flush as people applauded and raised their own glasses. Tom, sitting next to me, elbowed me in the ribs. "Stand up, you idiot. Take a bow." I stood awkwardly, waved, and sat back down as quickly as possible. But I was smiling after dinner as people were cleaning up and kids were playing tag in the parking lot. Karen approached me. "Can I talk to you for a minute outside?" We stepped out into the cold November evening. The sky was clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from the city below. "I never properly apologized," Karen said. "Not really. I said the words, but I do not think I truly expressed how wrong I was and how grateful I am that you handled it the way you did." "Karen, it is ancient history at this point." "For you, maybe," she said, "but I think about it regularly. I was so caught up in my own issues, my own need to control things, that I almost caused real harm. If you had not had that heater, if you had listened to me and removed it, people could have been hurt during that cold snap. Pipes could have burst. People could have gotten hypothermia or worse, and it would have been my fault. But that did not happen," I pointed out gently. "And you changed. You took what happened and used it to become better. That is what matters." "I just wanted you to know that I see what you did," she said. "You stood your ground when it mattered, but you also showed grace when you did not have to. When I showed up at your door that night, you could have sent me away. You had every right to. Instead, you helped me, even though I had been making your life difficult. That is character. It was just the right thing to do." "Not everyone does the right thing," Karen said. "Believe me, I see it every day on the city council. People prioritize winning over solving problems. They hold grudges. They let ego drive their decisions. You did not do any of that. You just did what needed to be done. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching our breath fog in the cold air. "Well," Karen said finally, "I should let you get back inside before you freeze. I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Daniel, for everything." She headed back inside. I remained outside for a few more minutes, looking up at the stars and thinking about the strange journey of the past year. From a simple backup, heater to fines to conflict to crisis to resolution to genuine community. It had been exhausting and frustrating and ultimately rewarding in ways I never could have predicted. The winter that followed was challenging but manageable. There were cold snaps, but nothing like the previous year's Arctic blast. There were power outages, but they were brief and localized. And every time there was a weather alert or utility issue, the neighborhood group chat would light up with offers of help, status updates, and people checking in on each other. The diesel heater ran when needed, performed flawlessly, and mostly sat quietly in its housing like a reliable friend you do not see often but know you can always count on. Spring came again, then summer, then another autumn. Life continued its cycles. Tom's kids grew taller. Lisa's mom celebrated her 80th birthday with another huge party. Karen ran for re-election to the city council and won easily. Frank remained HOA president, doing the job with quiet competence and zero drama. And I continued working at the docks, maintaining my house, and being part of a community that had learned valuable lessons about what really mattered. Not property values or rule enforcement or maintaining appearances, but genuine human connection, mutual support, and the willingness to help each other through whatever challenges arose. The diesel heater, the source of so much conflict and ultimately so much positive change, remained in my garage. It was regularly serviced, properly maintained, and completely legal. It stood as a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing means standing up for yourself. That preparation is valuable, and that tools and systems are only as good as the people who use them and the values that guide their use. On the second anniversary of the Arctic blast, now an acknowledged milestone in neighborhood history, I found myself once again at a community gathering. This time it was just an informal get-together at the community center. No special program or presentations, just neighbors spending time together on a cold December evening. As I stood with a cup of hot chocolate, watching kids play and adults chat, Tom came up beside me. "Hey, did you ever think when you installed that heater 2 years ago that it would lead to all this?" I looked around the room at the faces I now knew so well, at the friendships that had formed, at the genuine sense of community that filled the space. "Not even remotely," I admitted. "I was just trying to be practical." "Well, your practicality changed a lot of lives," Tom said. "Mine included. I mean, Sarah and I had lived here for 5 years before all this happened, and I could barely name 10 neighbors. Now I know everyone. Our lives are richer for it." "That is good to hear." "You know what the funny thing is?" Tom continued. "Karen was right about one thing. Your heater did affect property values." I looked at him, concerned. "What do you mean, they went up?" Tom said with a grin. "People want to live in Meadowbrook Hills now. We have got a reputation as a tight-knit community that looks out for each other. Houses sell fast and above asking price. So even by her original metric, the thing she was supposedly protecting, she was wrong." I laughed. "Do not tell her that. She has come so far. No need to rub it in." "Oh, she knows," Tom assured me. "She mentioned it at the last council meeting. Used our neighborhood as an example of how community relationships matter more than strict rule enforcement." As the evening wound down and people began heading home, I took a moment to step outside into the cold December night. The sky was clear, the stars brilliant overhead. The temperature was around 0, cold but not dangerously so. The kind of cold that reminded you winter was real but did not threaten your survival. I thought about my diesel heater sitting in its housing in my garage, ready and waiting, a guardian against crisis. But more than that, I thought about the network of neighbors who would check on each other, help each other, support each other through whatever came. That was the real backup system, the most important preparation of all. Inside the community center, I could hear laughter and conversation, the sounds of people enjoying each other's company. It was a good sound, a human sound, a sound that represented everything that mattered about home and community. I smiled to myself and headed back inside, back to the warmth and connection, back to the life that had grown from conflict and crisis into something genuinely valuable. The diesel heater had heated my house, but the experience had warmed my life in ways no machine ever could. And that, I realized, was the real story worth telling.